Hey guys, tonight we step into a castle where the wind itself seems to hesitate before slipping past the stone walls. Imagine a torchlit chamber, tapestries muffling the cries of a newborn, and servants staring at each other with eyes wide enough to swallow their own thoughts. You're about to walk down corridors where doors remain bolted for decades, not to keep you out, but to keep one particular secret in. And yes, you probably won't survive the court gossip that swirled here, honestly. Medieval rumor mills were deadlier than swords, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I like to imagine this tale unfolding across 1,000 different midnight bedrooms. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the threshold of a royal nursery, the air heavy with beeswax candles and something far less sweet, fear. A princess has just been born. Normally this would mean trumpets, bells, a feast stretching into dawn, and nobles shoving each other for a chance to cradle the tiny heir. But here, silence. Only the midwives whisper. The queen, pale and trembling, clutches the sheets as the physician draws close to the king. His face trained into the sort of polite neutrality that says, "You're not going to like what I'm about to tell you." The child, they say, has a face too dreadful to show. Exactly what that meant. Historians still argue whether it was a natural deformity, a skin disease, or just the overblown gossip of rivals. What's clear is that the verdict arrived quickly. The baby would live, but not in public view. You can almost hear the shutters being closed, the locks being slid into place before the little girl even opens her eyes to the world. And here's where the absurdity kicks in. Medieval courts were used to spinning tales about miraculous births, babies born with teeth, with tufts of hair, even clutching tiny pebbles as if they'd stolen from the womb itself. But a princess hidden entirely because of her face. That was a scandalous level of secrecy. Some claimed it was punishment from heaven, others muttered curses about the queen's bloodline. A few even whispered that the king had seen something so uncanny in his daughter that he refused to acknowledge her existence. You trail behind the nursemaids carrying the bundled infant through winding passages. They move fast, heads bowed, because every extra step risks some courtier poking a curious nose around the corner. Down you go, into a side wing of the castle, where the air is cooler and the windows are bricked shut. Here she will grow, not quite prisoner, not quite princess, her name spoken only in carefully muffled tones. Every kingdom had its gossip economy, and this one flourished on the lack of information. Servants couldn't help but wonder, if the princess was so horrifying, why not simply end her life at birth, as cruel as that sounds? The fact that she was allowed to live suggested something more complex. Perhaps the king loved her despite appearances, or perhaps killing royal blood carried too many spiritual consequences. Remember, this was an age when people believed deformities could be omens, curses, or signs of divine testing. One court chronicler even scribbled in the margins of his book, "A blemished child foretells blemished reign." Subtle, right? Step back for a moment and picture the castle's social theatre. The nobles strut in their silks, planning marriages, campaigns, taxes, and you stand there knowing a little girl is growing up unseen just a few rooms away. At banquets, toasts are raised to the royal sons, while not a single goblet acknowledges the daughter cloistered behind curtains. And because humans cannot abide an information vacuum, stories bloom like mold. Some claim her face could stop a clock, or well, at least a medieval sundial. Others say her features were so divine that showing them would cause instant worship, and the king hid her to prevent political chaos. Funny how fear and flattery often get tangled together. As years trickle by, the hidden princess learns to crawl on cold flagstones, her little palms tracing cracks in the mortar like lines on a secret map. She babbles words to nurses who never quite meet her eyes. You can imagine her peeking through a sliver of curtain, watching the courtyard children playing chase, and realizing that her world is a fraction of theirs. When she asks why she cannot join them, the nurse pats her hand and whispers something vague, something about specialness and God's mysterious ways, which, let's be honest, is parent speak, for I have no good answer. The history books leave us dangling here. Did the king occasionally visit her chambers, or did he avoid her entirely, ashamed of the face that mirrored his bloodline in ways he couldn't control? We don't know. What we do know is that secrecy became the punishment, not only for her but for anyone caught gossiping too loudly about her existence. In fact, one record from a neighboring kingdom hints at servants being dismissed, even flogged for daring to spread rumors of the princess who must never be seen. Imagine losing your job not for stealing bread, but for whispering at the wrong time in the kitchen. And here's the quirky tidbit you didn't expect. In some versions of the story, the castle supposedly maintained two sets of portraits, one official, showing a perfectly ordinary royal family, and another set hidden in a locked cabinet, with the princess painted in grotesque caricature. Exaggerated nose, twisted features, wild eyes. Historians doubt these secret portraits ever existed, but the fact that people invented them tells you how desperate they were to picture the unseen. So, you walk those corridors, passing tapestries heavy enough to muffle sound, knowing that behind one curtain lies a childhood stunted by secrecy. The castle seems to lean in on itself, like a building complicit in hiding the truth. Every clang of armor in the courtyard, every cackle of servants around a fire becomes a soundtrack to a life unfolding in shadow. You can almost hear the princess pressing her ear against the stone wall, drinking in the noises of a world she will not touch. And still, the question simmers. Was her face truly so terrible? Or was she simply unlucky enough to be born different in a world that demanded perfect heirs? Historians still argue whether the entire tale was exaggerated. Perhaps she had nothing more than a birthmark, magnified by fearful imaginations. Whatever the truth, secrecy becomes a sentence heavier than any iron chain, and you sense how punishment in history wasn't always inflicted with whips or dungeons. Sometimes it was inflicted with silence. You drift deeper into the castle, past walls that now feel like a second skin around you, each stone memorizing secrets it will never confess. Years have passed, and the princess, the girl hidden from birth, has grown tall enough to brush her head against the curtains that veil her from view. Childhood giggles have stretched into long silences, and what remains of her world is defined by shadows, whispers, and the occasional scent of roasting meats drifting in from feasts she is never invited to. You sit with her in that room, where the only light comes from narrow slits cut high into the walls. Dust spins in the beams like tiny dancers, and she watches them for hours because it is the only show she is allowed. Her bed is carved from oak, draped in embroidered cloth, but despite the finery, the air hums with confinement. The sound of laughter filters in from the courtyard below, children chasing each other, servants arguing over spilled water, dogs barking. She presses her ear against the cold stone and tries to catch every detail, piecing together a life she is denied. What does she look like? Well, you still don't know because the record never agrees. Some chroniclers describe her as grotesque, claiming her face bore swelling lumps or a twisted jaw. Others say she had skin so pale it seemed translucent, veins showing like rivers on parchment. Yet in certain folk tales, her beauty is said to have been too overwhelming for mortal eyes, a kind of celestial danger that forced her father to hide her. Historians still argue whether these contradictions reflect fact, fantasy, or the kingdom's attempt to justify what was essentially lifelong imprisonment. Her attendants try to soften the cage. They bring her books copied painstakingly by monks, full of saints and monsters and moral lessons written in looping Latin. You lean over her shoulder as she reads, noticing how her finger traces each illuminated initial, her imagination stitching herself into the stories. When she reaches the tale of Saint Wilgefortis, a bearded female saint whose own father tried to force her into marriage, she lingers. Perhaps she sees a mirror of her own confinement, a woman defined by her face and fate, Quirky fact for you, the castles of this period often had listening tubes, little channels carved into the stone to eavesdrop on what was happening in other rooms. Now imagine the princess pressing her lips to one of these tubes, whispering secrets into the hollow shaft, not knowing if anyone on the other end hears them. A one-sided conversation with strangers becomes her rebellion, a tiny break in the wall of silence. From your vantage, you notice the way myths around her grow. A maid who once glimpsed her silhouette swears she saw horns. A guard claims her eyes glowed in torchlight like a cat's. Another insists she wore a mask of silver whenever she approached her window, as though her face was too dangerous to show the air itself. The more she stays hidden, the more monstrous or divine she becomes. And you realize something dark. Sometimes concealment makes a person larger than life, not smaller. Meanwhile, the politics outside her chamber churn on. The king wages wars, arranges marriages, and builds alliances, but you see him avoid this wing of the castle altogether. Whether out of shame, fear, or superstition, he leaves his daughter to the care of women whose loyalty is bought with heavy coin and heavier threats. Whisper the wrong word about her face, and you could lose more than your position. You could lose your tongue. That's not metaphor. There are rumors of punishments for loose lips. Remember, medieval rulers loved theatrical deterrence. You gossip, you suffer, and everyone else gets the message. One winter evening, the princess sneaks close to a slit window. She presses her eye to the gap, and snowflakes sting her cheek as they blow in. Outside, she sees torches snaking through the courtyard, a festival. Musicians play, dancers whirl, jugglers toss flaming batons. For a moment her heart lifts, and you feel it too, the thrill of glimpsing a world she might have been part of. But then she notices one performer wearing a crude mask, a distorted, ugly face stretched into a leer. The crowd laughs, pointing, jeering. The joke is clear enough. Even hidden, she has become entertainment, a shadowy figure exaggerated for the amusement of others. The years stack like bricks. She grows into adulthood in those same chambers, her world expanding only through rumor. Servants bring news of exotic visitors, merchants from Venice with glass mirrors, knights from France with tales of crusades. She listens, hungry, and you wonder how much she dreams of stepping into their stories. And yet, every night, she returns to her chamber bed, curtains pulled tight. Her face known only to herself. Here's a mainstream historical fact that grounds this for you. In several medieval courts, including France and Spain, nobles with deformities or illnesses were sometimes concealed from public view, not only to protect the dynasty's image, but also to prevent rivals from using them as political weapons. A single rumor about an unfit heir could topple a claim to the throne. So while her story feels mythic, it's rooted in real anxieties of royal bloodlines. And here's where the scholarly debate gets spicier. Some argue the tale of the hidden princess is pure invention, a metaphor cooked up by political enemies to portray the ruling family as cursed. Others think she existed but was exaggerated, her face no more unusual than a common birthmark or cleft palate. Still others insist she might have been perfectly ordinary, hidden instead for superstitious reasons, like an astrologer predicting doom if she ever appeared in public. Historians still argue whether this is biography, allegory, or propaganda, and honestly, the uncertainty might be the most telling part. You sit with her again in silence. She's older now, her voice low, her questions sharper. "What do they say about me?" she asks a nurse. The woman hesitates, then lies, murmuring something about respect and mystery. But you can feel the truth pressing down. The girl is both forgotten and unforgettable, her absence woven into songs, jokes, and warnings. She is a ghost haunting her own lifetime. And because you've made it this far, here's a small joke to lighten the gloom. Imagine being so feared for your face that people write entire chronicles about you. And you're sitting there thinking, really? I just have acne, medieval problems, eternal problems. Still, the atmosphere thickens. You walk the length of her chamber one more time, touching the cold stone, the worn fabric of curtains, the grooves in the floor where her pacing feet carved subtle trails. The castle holds her story in silence, yet outside its gates, people are shouting it into legend. The louder the rumors, the tighter her prison grows. Tighter her prison grows. The castle walls breathe around you like an old animal, sagging with the weight of secrets they've guarded for decades. The hidden princess is no longer a girl at all. Her youth has drained away within these curtained rooms. She sits in a tall-backed chair now, her hands folded, her body draped in heavy silks that feel more like armor than finery. You watch her eyes linger on the door, that unyielding barrier that has never once opened outward for her. Word has begun to slip beyond the court. In markets and taverns, people murmur about the faceless princess. Some claim she's still alive, hidden in eternal childhood, never aging because the devil himself cursed her. Others insist she died long ago and that the king hides only a skeleton, locked away like a family heirloom too shameful to bury. A few bold balladeers spin her into tragedy, their songs lamenting a woman too lovely for mortal sight, concealed so the world would not burn with desire. You see how one life, confined and hushed, has already exploded into 1,000 contradictory myths, and the punishments grow sharper. Servants accused of leaking tales vanish. A cook is said to have lost his post after whispering her name over spiced wine. One knight, brave or foolish, joked aloud that if the princess ever wed, her dowry should include a sack for her head. He was found dismissed by morning, his armor removed, his reputation shattered. Rumor, it seems, is policed as fiercely as treason. You can almost imagine the king pacing his chamber, muttering that a hidden daughter is less dangerous than a spoken one. Still, the princess herself fades. Some accounts suggest she simply stopped speaking, withdrawing into herself until silence was her only companion. Others paint her as a reader of forbidden texts, filling her isolation with strange knowledge. There's even a fringe tidbit, half folklore, half scandal, that she trained a pet raven to speak, and that the bird would croak her secrets through the window slits at night. Whether true or not, you can picture her laughing softly in the dark, amused that her words found wings where she could not. Then, one season, she vanishes. No records say how. Was it death, quiet and unmarked, her body tucked into a crypt with no inscription? Or did she escape, slipping away in the chaos of war or plague, wandering among commoners who never knew her origin? Historians still argue whether her disappearance was real or manufactured. Perhaps the court destroyed every trace of her to erase the shame once and for all. Whatever the truth, she dissolves into rumor, leaving only the echo of her confinement behind. You wander outside the castle gates at last. Farmers repeat the tale as a warning to children. Behave, or you'll be locked away like the faceless princess. Pilgrims whisper about her at shrines, debating whether she was punished by God or punished by men. In some villages, they even invent rituals, masks worn at festivals, girls painted with ash, to remember the one who was never seen. It's remarkable, isn't it? A life denied daylight still casts shadows long after, and here's your mainstream fact to anchor this swirl. Across Europe, stories of hidden royals crop up repeatedly. In France, whispers told of a masked man locked in the Bastille. In Spain, chronicles mention secret heirs banished to monasteries. In Russia, rumors swirled of children spirited away to protect dynastic purity. The faceless princess slides neatly into this pattern, a legend born of politics, secrecy, and the human hunger for stories too strange to disprove. You pause, standing in the echo of her absence, and wonder, was she ever real or just a convenient fable, a punishment tale invented to thrill and terrify? Perhaps she was flesh and blood, with a crooked smile and a heart full of longing. Or perhaps she was never more than a whisper, a rumor sharpened into a weapon by those who wanted to stain the crown. The debate still rages, scholars scribbling furiously, readers leaning closer, and none of them truly satisfied. If you've been following her steps with me, you realize the cruelest part wasn't the alleged face, but the sentence of invisibility. To be erased while alive, to live in rooms muffled by curtains, to become more legend than woman. That was the real punishment. And maybe that's the echo worth carrying, not her appearance, but her silence. And before we drift into the quiet end, here's a final joke for you. Imagine the princess looking down from heaven, scrolling through centuries of speculation and saying, "Really? Locked away for this nose? You people need better hobbies." The castle dims in your mind's eye. The rooms grow soft, the air heavy with the dust of centuries. You step back slowly, leaving her where she has always been, half real, half dream, always unseen.